Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all our attendees joining us today for this latest Data Science Central webinar. This is Bill Voorhees, your host. I'm the Editorial Director with Data Science Central and also Chief Data Scientist for Data Magnum. I'd like to start off our event today by thanking Alteryx for sponsoring today's event. Alteryx is a longtime supporter of the Data Science Central community, and we're honored to have them sponsoring our event today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to mention and show our appreciation for some of our other recent sponsors, including Tableau, Qbol, Dell Statistica, Exaptive, Microsoft, and Pivotal, to name just a few. Now, our past webinars are available on demand at datasciencecentral.com. If you haven't had an opportunity to view them, I encourage you to take a look. They provide some very useful insight into a wide variety of topics of interest to our data science community. So today's webinar is entitled New Methods for Data Preparation, Advanced Analytics, and Visual Analytics, No Coding Required. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly review the format of today's webinar. Today's event will be 1 hour long. We'll have two presenters that I'll introduce in just a minute. There'll be 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A following the presentation. And this event is being recorded and will be available on datasciencecentral.com later this afternoon following today's live event. I'd also like to encourage our attendees to provide questions throughout the presentation. We'll be reviewing and presenting them on your behalf during the Q&A portion of today's event. Now, I'm very pleased to introduce today's speakers, Sean Mistry with Alteryx and Tom Christian with Tableau. Now, Sean is part of the EMEA Solutions Engineering team at Alteryx. He has over 10 years of experience in the IT and software industry working with BI and advanced analytic tools. Tom is Senior Product Consultant for Tableau Software, the leading provider of fast analytic and data visualization software. And at Tableau, Tom helps people make breakthrough advances with visual analysis. So thanks for being with us today, Sean and Tom. We're looking forward to your presentations. To gain competitive advantage, businesses need to be able to access, blend, and perform advanced analytics on all their data. Traditionally, the analytic process would involve multiple groups, the slow building of data marts, and intensive coding. However, new tools allow businesses to create a culture of self-service analytics by enabling all of these steps within an easy-to-use, repeatable workflow and an ad hoc data discovery through visual analytics. And in today's webinar, you'll learn by example as we walk through how to perform basic data blending, tasks such as parsing XML data, utilize predictive analytics to analyze part failure trends, apply spatial analytics to find and analyze customer behavior by store, output all underlying analytic works to a visual format. So, Sean, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can begin as soon as you're ready to go.
Cheers, thank you for that. So, hi everyone, my name is Sean Mistry, and we're going to run through today, obviously talking about some of the new methods for data preparation, advanced analytics, and visual analytics by using a combination of Alteryx and Tableau with no coding required. So the previous state of analytics, often IT was responsible for munging data and cleansing to ensure data quality. In addition, IT often had to gate the data or limit access to data in an effort to keep data sharing and usage consistent. Because of all the steps, it was very long. It was a very long process before the data even arrived at the data scientist's desks for the laborious task of then coding and performing advanced analytics. Eventually, the processed data arrived at the desk of the business users, who then had to derive insights from the pre-analyzed data. If the business question had changed or new data had come to light, the process would then need to start all over again. So in terms of how analytics now looks today, modern analytics has the power of data prep, advanced analytics, visual analytics, and puts it into the hands of the line of business users by enabling easy data access, flexible data blending, the application of advanced analytics, and the visual data discovery. An organization enables self-service analytics. This allows organizations to ensure that all their decisions are data-driven and that they can make easy decisions on all of their data in an agile fashion, allowing them to gain competitive advantage and make their data-driven decisions proactively, not reactively. So in terms of how data is actually being used now by using Alteryx. So Alteryx is a repeatable workflow to prep and blend and analyze all of your data. First, we enable analysts in order to access their data. So if you look at some of the logos that we have on the left-hand side, the data will be coming into Alteryx. So it could be data that's stored in a data warehouse, could be data that's stored locally. Could be data that's coming from a third-party API such as Salesforce or Twitter, and being able to build a workflow from a single platform, being able to take that data, prepare and blend it together. From there, we can enrich the data further. So within the data, we might need to construct drive time analytics to get from a particular customer to get to a particular store, or enrich the data further using things such as census data or Dun & Bradstreet. From there, rather than traditionally you've had to push this out to another application or call in resources from IT to help construct the data into a format another application could use, Alteryx can do this from a seamless workflow and being able to leverage the power of predictive tools that have maybe been packaged together using R. The line of business users are empowered to use, in this example, a logistic regression in order to try and predict or make predictions based on the data that they're feeding in. From there, the users can then output the data. So traditionally, you have had to output in a certain format, and it was very much dictated to you. Now, using the power of Alteryx, you can output in many different formats and even share the workflow or share the insights that you've created. We can output for more dynamic dashboarding or visualizations to the likes of Tableau, and all of this can be done in a seamless fashion, either outputting as a TDE file or even publishing directly to a Tableau server. In terms of Alteryx as an analytical platform, we see ourselves as a leader in self-service data analytics to be able to provide analysts with the unique ability to easily prep, blend, and analyze all of their data using a repeatable workflow. Then deploy and share the analytics at scale for deeper insights in hours, not weeks. So being able to take that data, again, in 3 steps. Prepare and blend and analyze the data using repeatable workflows, so by connecting to and cleansing the data from these data warehouses, cloud applications, spreadsheets, and other sources. Easily then being able to join from many different sources and perform analytics such as predictive, stats, or spatial using the same intuitive user interface. We can then deploy and share the analytics at scale. So from an operational standpoint, your analytics can be performed by deploying production processes. You then have the ability to schedule and scale your analytic workflows, and then also publish the analytic apps for customized insights. And then delivering deeper insights in hours, not weeks, because we're empowering the data analysts and the line of business users to perform their own analytics rather than using or leveraging resource from IT, and then rapidly process large volumes of data without writing any code. And finally then just to output the analytic results to all or most of the popular data formats. So with that, I'll pass over to Tom.
Cool. So hello everyone, I'm Tom and I'm going to be running through the Tableau side of things. And one thing I want you to keep in mind throughout everything that we've got today is exactly as Sean said, which is both Alteryx and Tableau are doing something incredible, which is putting power into the hands of the business user. He said it perfectly, and what it really means when it comes down to it is actually the people that know what's going on in the business, the people that know the ins and outs and have the data there are the ones that are now using that data to actually display insight and actually understand what's going on. The reason why that's so important is this feeds perfectly into what is our mission statement, which is we help people see and most importantly understand their data. Data's everywhere, whether you've got an iPhone or any other smartphone or any phone in general, or you just walk from your home to the shops. The amount of data that you just gather as well as inherit just on that journey is incredible. And we help you manage that in a way that it's familiar to you, that's intuitive, and makes you feel empowered when you're using it. And just to reiterate that, here at Tableau, we're all about intuitiveness, all about empowering you to just drag and drop in formats that you're familiar with already. So nothing should feel scary, nothing should feel different. It should all feel like you're hands-on with your data, moving it around and putting it into places that feel familiar. The outputs as well are extremely powerful. You can see here, you can also output it to iPads and mobile devices as well. But it's the fact that anyone can now access that data anywhere and do that insight just on the fly is really what we'll try and show you today. And it works perfectly with Alteryx as well, just because as soon as that data is there and ready to use and outputted, then everything is just on the fly, fast, quick, and really great to use. I'll pass it back to Sean just to start with a demo, and hopefully you'll start seeing some of these topics in place.
Perfect. Cheers. Thanks, Tom. So what I'm going to do now is just share my screen, and we're going to go into a live demonstration of Alteryx. When we're carrying out the live demonstration, again, if you've got any questions along the way, please feel free to drop your questions into the Q&A box as we go through. So now that I've shared my screen, we should be presented with the Alteryx desktop designer view. So it's from here that we can start to enable and empower the end users in order to build these repeatable workflows. All of the tools you see at the top of the screen, these can all be added into your workflow. We also have, slightly higher up, a number of tool categories. Again, to make this as intuitive and as meaningful as possible to the end users, the vast majority of tools have all been color coordinated. So, for instance, green tools are for bringing in or outputting data. Again, you'll notice that we have an input data tool, an output data tool, but we also have the ability to output directly to a Tableau workbook as well. And we come on to the output later on in the demonstration. Again, blues are for preparing our data. So as we go through, we're taking you into a journey of your data, bringing data in, preparing, joining or blending data, parsing data. And as we scroll through the list, we can also see that we have a whole vast array of predictive tools. Again, this is included in the core product, and the clues in the name, they have been created using the R programming language. But what our Alteryx developers have done is package these tools together so they can be used in a way in which it's more intuitive for the end user, so using the drag and drop method. To begin, what I'm going to do is take an input data tool and drag and drop this onto my canvas. On the left-hand side of the screen is where we would configure the tools, and in the middle is where we build the workflow. At the bottom is where we have our results window. So every step of the way, in an iterative fashion, every time we add a new tool in and run the workflow through, we can see the data change. To begin with, we need to point to some data. So I can either select to point to a file, or I can choose to point to a data source. We support a vast array of data sources in Alteryx, and we can connect via OLEDB or ODBC. We can also bring in data from third-party APIs as well. I have a local SQL server set up, so I might want to bring data in from there. Again, I can connect via ODBC. If someone did have skills in terms of scripting skills for SQL, or if IT have already maybe created some of the scripts for you, you don't have to start from scratch. Every time you could actually just copy and paste them into the SQL editor. If, however, though, you know the table, you know the name of the table that you want to point to, you can use what we call the Visual Query Builder in order to visually build up your query, or just simply select a table as I'm about to do. So I'm going to select my customer responder table, double click and add this in. You'll notice that when I click back on SQL Editor now, it has automatically populated that script for me. So again, from an end user's standpoint, if they don't have those skills, that's not an issue with Alteryx, because using the Visual Query Builder view, they can just select to the table that they have access to. We're then going to hit OK and then press Run. And what we'll be doing here is actually pointing to our data and retrieving the results back. So in this first data set we have brought in, we're connecting to customer data. And in particular, it's customers and sales and marketing information. The last week a marketing campaign went out, and we have this responder field indicating whether someone took part or did not take part in the particular marketing campaign. We also have name and address information, and also a postal code field as well. So thinking ahead, maybe we might want to send out a new marketing campaign next week, but out of the people that responded yes or no, how can we then target maybe those that responded yes or did take part, but then going forward we might want to target those that responded yes, but only those that are very likely to respond yes again. So how can we try and figure this out? And based on this information, we've not got much to go on. So we might want to look at their particular spending habits. So I'm now going to bring in another data stream. So using my input data tool, dragging and dropping this into the workflow. Alongside connecting to data sources, we can also bring in many different types of files, or even just kind of raw data. I have a data extract stored locally that I might want to connect to, and if we actually hit run, we can actually see the types of data we're looking at. If we look at our results now, we can see that we've actually brought in what appears to be just a raw field that might contain certain data. If we look at the field itself, we can see that all of the data seems to be formatted as XML. So if this ever is the case, or if you ever encounter these types of data problems, that's not an issue in Alteryx. We can read in many different file formats. Again, on the left-hand side in the configuration, if I click on the drop-down, we can see a brief list of some of the data file formats we can natively read in. In this scenario, though, the field has all been formatted as XML, and what I need to do first of all is actually parse this data out in order to make sense of it. Using the Alteryx toolset, I'm going to click on my Parse Tools category. From here, you'll notice that we have a tool labeled XML Parse. I'm now going to drag and drop this XML Parse tool into my workflow. And what I'm going to do is parse out the field labeled root. I'm just going to let Alteryx auto-detect the child elements, and then we're then going to hit run. Again, I'm not doing any configuration at this stage. If we view the results, you'll notice that we've got a number of different fields. Again, if I move this across slightly, you can see that we've extracted and parsed out the root, but then if we actually look at the actual fields themselves, you'll notice that they've all now nicely been parsed out. What I'm going to do to tidy this data up a bit slightly further is where I've got this root field, I won't need that going forward. So we're going to do some preparation as we go through the workflow. I'm going to take my select tool and just drag and drop this in. So I'm now going to pick which fields I want to bring forward. So the workflow reads from left to right. Data will come in from one side and come out on the right hand side. So coming into this select tool, I'm going to remove the root field. If I open this out slightly further, just so you can see all of the views, you can see we can select or deselect any fields. We can also change the field data types. Because this came from a raw text file, some of the field types will all be labeled as string. So we can apply context to the data as we go along. If I take my unit price, I could turn that into a double. Customer ID, we could turn this into an integer. Where I've got this quantity underscore ordered underscore new field, again, I can turn that into an integer as well. I can also rename my fields. So as the end user, I don't like or I don't see any reference as quantity underscore ordered underscore new, in which case I can just rename this to be called quantity. I can also delete any of the fields. So going forward, I don't need order ID, sales, profit, ship date, or order date. I can deselect those and then hit run. So as we go through, we're slowly starting to transform the data. You notice that if we scroll all the way to the right-hand side, our newly created field of quantity now shows up with the correct field header name. And again, if we wanted to, we can always go back to the select tool and make a change. The data that we brought in is just transactional data. So every record represents an individual transaction, and there could be several transactions by the same customer. So we have a customer ID field here. We can see there's many by, let's say, customer 3. If a field doesn't exist, or if we need to modify an existing field, we can use what we call the formula tool to either modify an existing field value using the drop-down, or start typing in a new field name. So I want to construct a new field called total spend, because I need to find out what the total spend is per customer, or how many transactions each customer has made. So I'm going to build out a simple expression. Again, similar to how you might do in something like Excel. We're going to take the unit price and add that into the expression box and multiply it by the quantity. Once we carry this out, we'll have generated a new field. So if I hit run and scroll all the way to the right hand side, you will see our newly created field called total spend, which is great. I've got a new field which works out my total spend. The only problem is it's only done it per transaction. So what I actually want is some type of group by or aggregate on this customer ID field. To do this, I'm going to click on transformation because I need to transform my data. So I'm going to take the summarize and add this into my workflow. What the summarize will allow me to do is select a field or fields, in this case my customer ID, click on add, and I'm going to perform a group by. I'm then going to scroll to my newly created field, click on add, and then perform a count. And I can rename these as I go along. So my count field, I want to rename to be called transactions. I'm then going to take the same field again, but this time I want to sum up the values. So perform a sum, and again it will prefix it with sum underscore. I can just omit that. So I'm left with 3 fields: customer ID, transactions, and total spend. So now when I hit run, we can transform the data so we can clearly see, well, customer 3 made 6 transactions and spent just over £5,000. Now that we've changed the formatting of this data, we can now start to think about blending it together, because at the moment all of these data streams are independent of one another. So now, using my join tools, we can use a simple join that will take data from the left-hand side, data from the right-hand side in the data stream, and we can choose to join by a specific field or fields. So in this case, I'm going to take customer ID from the left and join on customer underscore ID from the right. We can also select which fields we want to bring forward. So I'm going to take off my home value, income, and some of the previous transactional data. From the right-hand side, I won't need the customer underscore ID. When I hit run now, we're left with a complete and concise data set, where we've got our data from the left blended together with data from the right, so we can clearly see which customers are spending what and how many transactions each customer is making. Now going forward, we might need to predict that responder field. So now that we've got the most up-to-date transactional data in one place with our customer information, we might start to think about performing some type of predictive analytics on our data. Again, if we're doing this in the real world, you might choose to build a sample of data and then apply the sample to build a model. But what we want to do is just show you some of the capabilities in this demonstration. So I'm going to take a logistic regression, because what we're trying to predict is this yes-no, almost binary information, 1 or 0, yes or no. So taking a logistic regression, we can add this into the workflow. And we said earlier about that these tools have been packaged together. So for the end user, they just need to fill in the blanks. So for instance, the first thing I'm going to do is give it a name, because we're going to build a model. The second part will be my target variable. And all I'm going to do is select the responder field, because what we want to do is predict the yes-no behavior. Based on my response, we then have our predictor variables. And these are almost like a hypothesis to say, I believe that transactions and total spend will have an impact on whether someone responds yes or no. What we're doing at this stage is building a model, so we're not applying it back to the data. So when we hit run, this will then take our blended data and just pass it through the logistic regression and build a very standard model. And we'll be able to view the results of the model if I open this up. So you should be able to see now a very generic stats report. Again, for those of you that are from a stats or data science background, this will be more meaningful. For those of you that have very little knowledge of stats or even using some of these tools, Alteryx has a field which could be used as a kind of a starting point for you. So alongside the fields we selected, transaction and total spend, some people might look just at the furthest field to the right, and we have a number of stars as indicators, indicating how significant, how relevant, and how much association it has with the responder field of what we're trying to predict. So transactions has 2 stars, indicating that it does have some correlation and association, but total spend has 3, indicating that actually based on the model we're creating, there is a high correlation here, an association to say, well, if total spend increases, the likelihood someone responds yes will be more favorable. Again, you might start to look at the actual values that are being generated from the model to determine whether you proceed or whether you go back and amend the fields that you selected. If you ever need to see the underlying makeup of the logistic regression, or if you want to build upon what we've created or use your own model, you can always right-click and choose to open up the tool itself. Nestled deep within the workflow is what we call the RTool container. And if I just flash this up on the screen very quickly, you'll be able to see the R code being used to generate the logistic model. And again, you can always go in and amend these values to build your own bespoke model. What I'm going to do now is apply this back to my data. So using the scoring tool, we will then take the data from Alteryx that we're feeding in and building on the model, and just apply this back to the data. I'm going to add a browse tool because I want to see a complete set of results. So we're going to let this run through. Once this completes, we will then have information or a probability score on whether someone responds yes or no. So now that we've got our probability scores, what we might start to do is maybe carry out some type of spatial analytics to try and plot where these customers reside. We have a postal code field. So what I'm going to do is use my address tool category and use the street Geo Coder. From here, I'm going to select the postal code field and I'm going to generate a spatial object. So we can, at least within Alteryx, visualize the points, each of the customer points on a map and see where they reside. Alongside this, what I might then want to do is start to maybe bring in a third data set. Because what I'm thinking here is, based on where the customers reside in terms of where they're spending the money, what stores are nearby which customers. So again, using my input data tool, I'm then going to point to another file. In this case, I might just bring in the CSV file, which has information relating to the site locations. Again, with the data that you can see on the left-hand side, we've got a postal code field. So I'm going to use the address geocoder again and add this in to my workflow. I'm going to also add the postal code field and create another spatial object. So I'm just going to view these results now. So what I want to do is actually plot all of my data and represent it visually on a map. So now if I apply a base map, again using the TomTom data that we're enriching our dataset with further, we can plot where the stores are. If I click on the customer data stream, we can also then plot, if we overlay a map, where the customers reside. So what I want to now do is actually find out which customers are actually near which store. Using my Spatial Analytics tools, I can then do what we call a find nearest. So what I'm going to do is take the find nearest tool, drag and drop this in, and feed in the two data streams. So my customer data and data relating to the stores. From here, I'm going to find the nearest point. I'm going to also do a drive time in minutes to say that if the customers leave their house in any direction, which stores are they actually near? And again, we'll just run this data set through. So fetching our predicted score values and geocoding them, we're then going to bring in site location data and geocode the stores. We're then going to apply spatial analytics to find the nearest stores for each of the customers. Based on the data that we're now able to visualize, we can then find the stores, and if we view the actual underlying makeup of the data and scroll across, you can see that what we get generated is a drive time in minutes and miles of how near the customers are to these stores. What we then might do is now start to think about the final step of outputting this to Tableau. So in Alteryx, we actually have a Tableau toolkit. One of the things that we need to do, though, before we output the results, is we're going to turn our spatial data into a point that can be represented in Tableau very easily. I'm going to take my polygon for Tableau and drag and drop this in. All we're going to do is select a field, in this case the customer spatial object field, and we're then going to output these results to a Tableau workbook. So using the Output Data tool, which is specifically designed for Tableau, I'm going to browse to a file location, which I can then output to Tableau. Once this then runs through, we can then specify in the workflow if we want to write out to another data set. And then from there, I'm going to now pass over to my colleague, Tom. Tom, just going to send you control.
Great, thank you very much. I'll start sharing my screen. So Sean's done all the nice hard work for us and magically transformed that data into something usable. And the fantastic thing is now that it's in that easy-to-use identifiable format, it's super easy to start playing around with this in Tableau. So hopefully on the screen you can all see this is an example workbook that I'll build out with you in the next 10 minutes or so. And you can see here this is actually running in Google Chrome at the moment. And if I just select a store number, let's pick this 107, the lowest selling store, we can easily see those exact same points on a map that Sean just created, as well as which customers they are. And we can actually start immediately asking business questions about what's going on here. You can see that distribution of the yes scores there seems fairly low. If I select these lowest 3 stores, and I'll give the video a chance to catch up, you can see they actually all seem to be within a small radius of one another. In fact, just on the fly, I can see that that's less than a mile, and there are 3 stores there. Perhaps that's one of the reasons why they're low-selling stores. Perhaps we don't need this 3rd store here. What you can see I'm doing here is I'm asking real questions to our data, the data that we have, and I'm trying to find these answers that previously would be completely lost to us. Again, if I look at this distribution of yes scores and high-spending customers, you can see that between, let's say, 102, the curve trend looks like this, and let's pick the 3rd selling highest, 103. Interestingly, it looks actually like the score trend is slightly steeper. That tells us one of 2 things, that low-spending customers are more likely to return, but equally, maybe customers aren't spending as much overall on average as they are in 102. So what I want to show you today very quickly is just how you can create something like this just by dragging and dropping using that intuitive interface. So if I start here, here's the extract that Sean's kindly sent over. And you can see we have our dimensions, our categories that have been defined within Alteryx, as well as the measures there as well. And again, just to reiterate, the output is going to be here in Tableau Desktop. And then the idea is we can publish to Tableau Server, the view we had before. So let's start doing that. So first of all, the first thing I want to see is my sales by my different stores. So very simply, all I need to say is let's take a look at my stores. Drag that in, I can see my store numbers, and let's see my total sales. Just like that, I can see the sales per different stores. Let's just rank that very quickly. If I want to know which ones are above or below average, I can just bring in an average line just onto the table. And immediately, visually, I can see those which are above and below this average. Perhaps I don't want an average, I want a target line instead. Well, I can create a parameter that can just be my defined target. And let's just quickly bring this in as a reference line and say, oh, I just want to use this target, and that's my target line. I'll show this quickly. I can even color this based on which is below and above this line with a nice easy calculation of is my sales greater than my target. Bring this onto color. And now I can see those bars which are above the target and which ones are below. If I make my target slightly higher, make it harder for those stores to achieve that target, I can see that that visualization dynamically updates as I put in this new target. So let's go to a new sheet. That's a nice bit of analysis to begin with. But now let's look at my individual customers. So we've already seen that we've got this yes score based on the likelihood of repurchasing, as well as this total sales. So I'm going to start bringing this in. So first of all, let's see again our total sales. And I'm going to see this score of yes. I'm just double clicking, and there I have my yes score and my sales. I'm actually going to flip this around. Now all I need to do is say, okay, well, I don't want to see just the rolled up total for everything. I want to see this by my customers. So let's take this customer ID and bring this onto detail. And immediately I can see this trend. This is what we were building out previously in Alteryx. And in fact, it's actually this Alteryx key, which is just individually defining each customer because they purchased multiple times, that gives us this true trend of their sales. And to make this a filled circle, and if I want to add color based on that low to high scale, all I need to do now is just bring in, let's say, my total sales onto color, for example. And there I can see that high to low scale. If I want to see that nice red to green, I can do that very simply in Edit Colors. And let's give it a temperature instead, where green is good, red is bad. And then we have that flow from green to red. Nice and simple. In fact, I think before, in the previous example, I even had the score because we use total sales a lot. So I can do the same here. And again, just flick that round and reverse that again. So you can see, I'm just saying, okay, that's an interesting view. I'm dragging something new in. And again, I can just select what I need to see. The fact that you're constantly interacting with your data, bringing new things into the view, and taking out the things you aren't interested, that makes it so powerful for end users to use. I don't need to write anything. I don't need to use a wizard. It's just saying, I'm interested in this. Let's see how this fits with the rest of my view. So I'm going to do this one more time and show you the maps as well. So Sean's been very kind and used the Spatial Analytics tool to actually define a latitude and longitude for our data. If I zoom in very quickly, you can see that although we generate some in Tableau, they've been defined for us, so that's nice and easy to use. So I'm just going to, again, double click, and then let's bring in every single customer or Alteryx key again onto our detail. And immediately we get that map of every single customer as well as their location. Maybe I'm interested in which store they're actually nearest to, which store are they associated to for our analysis. So I can just drag this onto color. And there's that visual representation again of where our stores are or where the customers are based on where the stores are nearest. If I wanted to see which customers of these are the highest selling, then again, I just say, well, let's take my total sales. Let's put this onto size. Let's make this nice and big. I like that cartoon effect. Maybe not that big. And then we see we can immediately start spotting some massive outliers within our customers just by looking at the size of the bubbles. If I want to stand that out a little more, I can give that a border. But there's lots of different formatting that I can apply to actually start looking at this. I prefer it without a border. I'm slightly picky when it comes to formatting. One thing I might want to do here as well is I have my customers, but I don't actually have my stores where they lie. I can do this very quickly by just duplicating this axis. And now, if I see my second set, it's exactly the same at the moment. I'm just going to put store number onto detail, get rid of this Alteryx key. And we don't need total sales for those stores. Going to make this a nice shape, like a star. And let's make it black so it stands out. Now all I need to do is make this a dual axis. I'm just right-clicking here, and there's dual axis. And that allows me to overlay where the stores actually lie in comparison to all these customers. going to make it slightly smaller so they don't overtake the customer points here on the map. So again, in just 5 or so minutes, we've gone from a set of data to 3 powerful visualizations. The only thing I need to do now is bring them together. And I can do that in a dashboard by simply dragging and dropping again into my newly titled incredible dashboard analysis. Now I can just bring in, here's my nearest store. Here's my distribution of whether or not customers want to buy. And finally, my map somewhere over here as well. Let's bring this title up to the top and do some very quick formatting. We don't need this, or this, or this, or even this. We'll get rid of all of that. And again, in an incredible rush, but making sure I have time for questions, we've gone from a set of data to a dashboard, which shows exactly what we had to begin with. And now the only thing is just applying those action filters. So you can actually do this by just using this user's filter. And now I can say, show me my stores that I'm interested in. The tiniest button in the world, so I'll hover over it again. But there's this user's filter button here. And now, as soon as I'm selecting which stores I'm interested in, let's go back to those 3 problem stores we saw from before. And then we can see the distribution of customers for those stores, as well as actually where they picture on a map. Now, super speedy run through, but very last thing that we need to do is, I've found this insight, I think it's incredible. I think the rest of my colleagues will really benefit from seeing this data presented in a visual format that they'll recognize. So all I need to do now is publish this Tableau server. So if I go here and say publish workbook, and let's say here's our incredible analysis. And all I want is my very aptly named dashboard 1, and publish this. We go back right to the very start, where it opened up in a browser window. Here is the view we've just created in minutes, presented in a beautiful way for us to use. Even better still, I can subscribe to this, and as the data updates, as it's run through Alteryx and outputted, then we can get that new view and subscribe to it every Monday morning so we can see how our customer trends are changing. I could even edit this just right within my browser and change something if I was interested in seeing a different type of view, or most importantly, email this directly to colleagues that I know would be particular interest or have a particular interest in this type of analysis. That's a whirlwind run through, but just bear in mind how easy this was to pull this together, and very importantly, how much longer it would take in the past to do this kind of analysis in the likes of Excel or other types of tools. So just to wrap up, we're going to do a Q&A on this as well, and I'm just going to pass over to Bill to present that. But if there are any questions, there's some further points here, which Sean will also talk about as well. But we're here to answer any questions you have about Alteryx and Tableau, and hopefully this has been very useful.
Well, Sean, Tom, thanks for that excellent presentation. And we'll get started with today's Q&A session. And I want to thank the audience for their participation. We've had a great many questions that have come in during the presentation, and we'll do our best to get through them all in the time remaining. So during the Q&A session, I'll leave this screen up that has contact information for Sean and Tom if you'd like to contact them following today's webinar. So let's get started with the questions. Sean, I think this one is for you. Since blending is such a critical component for Alteryx, where can I go to see the list of all of the different types of data sources that Alteryx can, in fact, read in?
Yep, no problem. Thanks, Bill. With regards to that, we're actually quite transparent about everything that we can connect to out of the box. So if you actually go to the Alteryx website, which is www.alteryx.com, we have a section called Products, and in that list there is a section called Technical Specifications. From that list, we have a list of every single data source we can actually connect to. For each data source, you can actually click on the hyperlink, and it will actually take you to the page about the supported driver, and also for some of the data sources, there is a download as well. So to make sure you've got the correct driver, you can click on the link, and you'll actually download the correct driver for the data source you are interested in.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that answer. Now, Sean, I think this one is also for you from the audience. When you are fetching data into Alteryx, is the data actually moving from the database into the Alteryx server, or is this happening in database, and what is the implication for very large data sets?
Yeah, great question. So in our demonstration, we were using a standard input data tool to point to, in this example, an SQL data source to bring data in. As the data volume increases, again, sometimes it might not always be best to bring all the data across. We have a capability, and it's actually a separate category in the Tools menu called In-Database Capability. And that allows you to point to a data source, whether it's SQL, Oracle, or even now we support Hive, Impala, and Spark. So we can point to those data sources, run a query of some kind, using the Alteryx workflow method to build that query, so no scripting. And from there, you leave the data in situ, and the query runs on the data source architecture. So if you're working with, let's say, 50 billion plus rows of data, the data doesn't have to then be transferred down to Alteryx.
Terrific. Well, thank you for that answer. Now, when we merge data, typically the two merged files have to have a common identifier, but that's not always present. Does Alteryx support some type of fuzzy logic that helps us get a close match or the closest match?
Yep. So Alteryx has, well, there's a few different ways you could tackle this. You could use fuzzy matching, or even using the join tool itself. So in our demonstration, we joined on an ID. Again, we were lucky enough to have a data set which had customer ID in both fields. They were named slightly different, but it was still the same ID. You could actually join on textual fields as well. So you might have a name in both fields or a name in both data sets you could join on. But then we also have a find and replace and an append option, whereby you could do partial matching as well. So if someone's misspelt a particular field you're trying to match on, you could actually assign a match score and then only blend data together that has, let's say, 95% match or not.
Right, and obviously very important. Tom, when that data came over from Alteryx into Tableau, it popped up right away in that very nice-looking geographic chart. Is that an automatic feature, or did you have to pre-build that, or how much prep was required to make that happen?
So actually, one thing that you can do using the Tableau plugin for Alteryx is actually use a pre-built report like the one that I've built there, and you can connect to Alteryx. So Alteryx will use the existing template and just refresh the data for you. It means that if you've already done the work, it's a fantastic way of just using that report and then just feeding the data into it. In the case of actually the one that I demonstrated and already showed on the screen, that was something that I put together just before the call. And as you saw me rebuild it, it takes almost no time at all to put together.
Thank you. Now, I think one for both of you, and I expect this question has come in from a Tableau user who says roughly, gee, I can already do analysis in Tableau. What analysis should I be doing in Alteryx versus Tableau? So I think both of you could comment on what is the best type of analysis for each of your platforms.
Sean, I think we might get in an argument over this one.
Yeah, I think so.
So from a Tableau side, I think the key is really when it comes down to, we can do incredible visual analysis in Tableau, and you can do some preparation and some merging and joining together of data sources from within Tableau. But I think it's when the data is pretty much there. And the fact that you can then take that and actually drag your dimensions in. I think that's where the real power is. I suppose from Alteryx, and Sean, correct me if I'm wrong, this is more when you get into in-depth, very complex ETL and need to have that repeatable process made easy, I suppose.
Yep.
Or a more political way to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd just like to, also add that, if you're working with, more unwieldy data sets, and it does require a bit more intense kind of looking at the data, trying to figure out, is the data clear and concise? When you start trying to do things like sampling of the data, but also incorporating more than 2 data sets. So, it could be coming from third-party APIs. It could be coming from a particular data source, such as using the in-database capability. So if you're starting to do some of the more advanced things, then I think that's where there'd be a shift in using either Tableau or then using Alteryx.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both for those answers. Now, what you were demonstrating during the webinar were I would describe as discovery elements in the data. But ultimately, once we finish with discovery, we'll want to move this into production. And Sean, can I, for example, now that I've established this workflow, set this up as a pre-scheduled operation that runs, on every Sunday night or whenever I want it to run?
Yep. So within the desktop designer and even on the server, we have the capability to schedule workflows so they can be run on a fixed schedule, or even, things like every quarter or on the last Friday of every month.
Okay, terrific. And now a data science question. I saw that the underlying machine learning library in Alteryx was based on R, but suppose I want to build my own R models. Can I import R models?
Yep, so you could, so within the R tool container, that could be dragged and dropped in as any other tool. The end user could paste in their existing R code they might have created, and they can also bring in or add in additional packages as well.
Okay, so I can do it myself if I'm so inclined.
Yep, and then still feed the results through the rest of the workflow.
Okay, and Tom, maybe last question for you. Tell me a little bit about how then I go about sharing these visualizations from Tableau to my end user.
Absolutely. So you saw that very, very briefly through the presentation in the way that I can share this via Tableau Server. We have Tableau Server and Tableau Online. It's 2 key products that we use to actually distribute and govern our data behind it as well. But most importantly, this is all accessed via the web. So anybody can go to either the server address or online.tableau.com, log on using their credentials, and then see the visualizations and reports that are important to them. You also have a few options to distribute as PDFs, as well as actually have a downloadable format that somebody could use with something called Tableau Reader. But primarily, if you want that key interactivity as well as live up-to-date data, then Tableau Online and Tableau Server would be the best way to do that.
Well, Sean, Tom, thanks for some great answers to some very good questions. For those of you that asked questions that weren't answered today, we'll be sending all the unanswered questions to Sean and Tom and the Alteryx team so they can follow up with you after today's webinar. Now, I have just a few quick announcements. If you'd please mark your calendar for July 19th and our next DSC webinar, which will be 4 steps to improve search relevance, business outcomes, and user experience. And that's going to be sponsored by Crowdflower. Also, today's taping will be available for on-demand viewing later today, and you can find that on the homepage of datasciencecentral.com in the webinar tab, which is located at the top of the page. Well, this brings today's webinar to a close, and I'd like to thank our audience for their attendance and thoughtful questions, and a special thanks to Alteryx for their sponsorship, and our speakers today, Sean Mistry and Tom Christian, for their insights into today's topic. My name is Bill Voorhees. I'm very pleased to have been your host for today's event, and I look forward to seeing you all again on July 19th. Have a great day.